From the Beer to Whiskey Studios, high atop Barley's Tap Room on Washington Street in downtown Greenville, South Carolina, I'm your host, Russ Heaps, and this is an episode of Beer to Whiskey. In our ongoing quest to spread the gospel of good taste, we find ourselves at Barley's today to do a Big John and Five episode, which is when I get my good buddy here, Big John Richards, to pick a beer from among Barley's, 70-some taps. Yeah. And he tells us a little bit about them. We talk about them. He talks about the brewery. Sometimes we even talk about the history of brewing. It gets crazy. But having said all that, Big John, what are we doing here? This is different.
We're doing a Beer 101 today, Russ. So
it is a Beer 101,
surprise.
And I should have said that.
That's okay.
But there we go.
We're on our way, though. So we're going to be doing some fun stuff today, talking about, hopefully fun stuff, talking about mouthfeel. Because it's a common misconception that you can taste something like vanilla or orange or chocolate, because you can't. Most of that comes through your nose. You can only taste like 6 things, although science is trying to find new things every day. There could be 20 or so of them, counting like calcium. Which,
who would have thought?
No one knows. But really the big ones are the ones you learned about in school. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, fat, umami. Umami, right. And fat's actually the newest of the group that's really found like DNA evidence for it.
Fat's newer than umami?
Well, as a taste.
As a taste.
Right.
I've never heard of umami. I've heard of fat.
Umami, you're right though. Umami is also, it's some years now we've known about it. It's umami is the Japanese word for delicious or deliciousness. And it really describes kind of the savory flavor that you get out of like a good steak. It's that savory sensation.
Okay.
Because what's happening when something hits your tongue is you're really tasting it more like you feel pain than what you think about when you're tasting an orange, say.
Okay.
So mouthfeel is what's happening on your tongue that contributes to the overall sensation of taste. So when you're tasting vanilla, say, you're tasting sweet, but you're smelling vanilla, the actual aroma,
right.
And you put those two things together in your brain, oh, vanilla. You're tasting orange, you feel the sour, the tart, even the acid on your tongue, and then you smell the orange and you go, oh, that makes the taste profile to come together as a thing. So we're going to work our way through 4 beers. We're going to talk about sweet, sour first, and then sweet, because sour really fades off your tongue faster than anything else. Hits your tongue harder than any of the rest of them, but fades off a lot more quickly. So sour, then sweet. Then we're going to talk about carbonation a little, and then we're going to talk about bitterness, because bitterness builds the longest and stays around the longest.
Okay.
So we're going to work our way through 4 of these guys. And if you guys are following along at home, I'll punch out what we're doing as we do it. But you can really pick a few different things to represent what we're doing if you guys are trying to follow along and taste along with me. So for sour beer, you could really pick just about anything. I picked New Belgium's La Folie, because we're limited to the 72 taps they have here.
Only 72.
Right. So they happen to have one of these great classic Belgian-style barrel-aged sours. And it's really going to create that big, full, sour mouthfeel that covers the whole tongue, and stay away from the saltiness that comes with like a Gose. So with this guy, you're going to get a little of that kind of vinegary, balsamic-y sour. You're going to get a little sweetness on the back end too, but the sour is going to hit your palate really hard first. And that's what some of the trouble people have with bitter and with sour, is that they hit the tongue and stick around, or assault in some way. With sour, it's much more like a quick, heavy-duty assault. With the bitter, it's more like a building, kind of like a siege.
Okay.
So we'll start with the sour, and what you're going to kind of want to look for is that vinegary, what you're associating with a vinegar taste or a balsamic vinegar, and then let the sweet kind of take over from behind, because it's going to take over fairly quickly from the actual assault of sourness.
The vinegar is what I get on the nose.
Yeah. So to me, it almost hits in my cheeks and then feels like it's building around the rest of my mouth until the sour's really fading and almost gone by this point for me. I seem to have taken a much larger sip than
I
you
know.
did,
I
though.
thought maybe I was tasting different since I took a little more polite sip. But John's
There's no
a little,
politeness here.
John's a little more robust than I am.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. So there's your classic kind of Belgian sour. And like I said, it's that big, full coating mouthfeel of sour
Yeah.
that really gives it a chance to demonstrate the way sour works on your tongue. There's a lot of other stuff going on in there. There's plums and there's like raisins and there's even a little kind of like back of the tongue vanilla sweetness there, or back end of the experience vanilla sweetness.
I have to say, I'm not getting the back end vanilla sweetness
Yeah.
at all.
To me, it's after the sour starts to fade, which I said takes several seconds.
Yeah.
That
Or
you
in my
really
case,
start.
an hour and a half, apparently.
Well, Russ, we've discovered, does not gravitate towards sweet beers, if you will.
And I have to tell you that basically the main thing I get out of this is the vinegar.
Yeah, and it's on purpose. That vinegar flavor is there on purpose. It's built to be that kind of sour, puckering feeling that
Right.
gives you just that certain experience. And this is not an experience of what you're going to like or not going to like. This is just a training exercise. And I tell people all the time, this is not built for drinking in a bar. This kind of experience is not something you want to do with your friends, while you're just out trying to have a good time. This is something you do to teach your palate, so that you're a little more, I don't know, capable is not the right word. You're just,
Adept.
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 Adept is a great word.
I'm a writer.
There you go.
I do these things.
That's why he makes the big bucks. So, you sit down at the bar and you go, oh, that's a sour, bang. And you can go on about your business.
Right.
Versus, I don't know what I'm doing here and I don't know why I'm tasting what I taste and I want to go home,
It's
All
like
right.
everything else. It takes practice.
It does. And that's one of the reasons you would come into something like this and go, okay, let's actually sit down and try and figure out what's happening, how to recognize what it is, and then
Right.
we can move on into how we experience it and make a better, fuller picture of the whole. So we're going to go straight from sour to sweet, because the opposite of sweet is not bitter, it's actually sour. So we're going to knock right off the edge and go the other way entirely, the other end of the spectrum. This is a beer from Funky Buddha called French Toast. It's a double brown ale, so we're basically leaving hops completely out of the picture as far as taste goes. There'll be a little bit in the background. You're going to carry some of that cinnamon, some of the nutmeg, and the spiciness that you would get out of a French toast mixture, some of the creamy texture, because there's, I'm sure, some lactose and unfermentable sugars in there. But the sweet, the way it hits your palate with sweet, is going to just take whatever just happened with your sour, and it's going to send it right away.
And what is this called?
It's called French Toast.
French Toast.
Yeah,
Funky Buddha is a South Florida brewery, by the way.
indeed. Where Russ is from, or hails from. So you'll notice it just washes that sour right off your
It
tongue.
does. It does.
It's gone entirely.
And French Toast is an appropriate name for this.
Right.
Because you get a little bit of maple, you get some breadiness. and-
Yeah.
Yeah.
And putting that on a brown ale backbone, that's where you're creating all that breadiness, that aroma, flavor, texture. It is the unfermentable sugars that are sitting on your tongue and getting absolutely rid of that sour.
Yeah. Oh, I like this. And I'm ambivalent about Funky Buddha. And they make a lot of stuff that I'm just not crazy about.
Sure.
But I like this.
Yeah. And they've done some really good work. One of the reasons they're as popular up here as they are is they've come up with some really quality stuff.
Yeah.
They did I don't remember how long ago, a couple years back, 5 years back. I don't know, they all run together.
Yeah.
They did a beer.
Well, when you get to be your age, that
yeah,
does all
seriously.
run together. It's
when they did a beer to commemorate the '72 undefeated Dolphins season because they're
Yeah.
a Florida South Florida brewery, which was just stellar, absolutely
really?
fantastic. I think they only did it once, and it made its way up here, maybe by accident. It's hard to say.
yeah. I like that though.
Yeah,
That has got a nice. I couldn't drink a lot of it. I might be able to drink a 10-ouncer of that
right.
because it is.
It's so mouth coating. It's
Yep.
so rich and sweet.
Yep. Yep.
So, this next one, actually, we've done a Big John at 5 on. This is the Weihenstephaner Hefeweizen,
Okay.
and it is here for carbonation. And this will be fun because the sweet is just going to continue to sit on your tongue forever, so you wash it away. And this will be a great experience for how much carbonation just lifts flavor off your tongue. They call it scrubbing bubbles, like the Dow Company.
Right.
But as soon as those bubbles hit your tongue, it's like a scrub brush going over from front to back. And it doesn't linger with you. You get all that pingy, effervescent,
And
those
it's gone in a-
bubbles, and
it's gone in a
it's gone in
second.
an instant.
Yeah.
And you're left with some of the flavors, and it's amazing how much the flavor really pulls out of that, the banana, the clove, and everything. After what we just had, how much that carbonation lifts that so fast
Yeah.
that you really can taste that Hefeweizen, which is a very, very light beer. That's kind of amazing even to me.
It's a light beer, but there's a lot going on in it.
Right. Now, there's plenty of flavor going on
Yeah.
there, but you could sit here, you could eat this with, brunch. One of the reasons I'll probably never have a mimosa for the rest of my life is that Hefeweizen exists.
Yeah.
And it's so good with your brunch dishes, because if you put it with a hollandaise or something, and it's going to kill all of the creaminess of that sauce and leave you with the flavor, which is where all the magic happens. And it keeps brunch light, makes you just
Yep.
able to taste everything a little bit more. And we talked about in a segment ago, which peek behind the curtain, we do several of these in a session over the course of a day.
We're into about number 4 or 5 at this point.
Give or take. We talked about the way the carbonation level of like that DuPont can lift off the weightiness of a Thanksgiving dinner, say.
Right.
And that's exactly the same principle going on here. The carbonation just scrubs your tongue and cleans everything up so quickly that you really just get to move on and taste what's going on. Garrett Oliver wrote a book called The Brewmaster's Table, which is all about brewing about pairing beer and food. And he said a couple times that the hardest decision he usually has to make at a beer dinner is what course to pair with the Hefeweizen, because it goes with everything.
Yeah.
So it's a fun experiment there to really tell how quickly it can kill sweet, sour, and nearly anything else that's going on your tongue.
It did. It kind of erased everything.
Right. And the glaring exception to that rule is bitter. Once we get to bitter is the hammer. And that's where it either works for you or it doesn't work for you. You're going to like it or you're not going to like it. With bitter, and this is Uinta's IPA, just a straight up American IPA.
Yep.
With bitter, it's going to hit your tongue, and then it's going to be minutes down the road before the bitterness really reaches its full level. You might be a full minute and a half before you really start to register the full intensity of the bitterness. And that's one of the reasons, if you're tasting in a panel, say, you have to take a break from your IPAs and either go do something else, or you got to take a bread and crackers break or something like that, because the bitterness just stays with you forever. So when we pull this guy out and taste it, the bitterness is going to hit first, but we're just going to let it go. We're going to, over the next 20 or 30 seconds as we talk about how the bitterness just continues to happen.
And what is this?
Uinta's IPA.
Okay.
So you'll notice you pick a lot of the citrus up front.
Yep.
The bitterness hits, for me, the middle of the tongue and just sort of lingers there. But then your whole mouth dries out with that bitter flavor. And we were talking about this off camera, that, talking about a dry mouth and your mouth watering at the same time seems counterintuitive, but it's that process that's happening. Your mouth, this bitterness is telling your brain that your mouth is drying out. So it's going to supply tons of saliva to help, compensate for the problem. It's not actually drying out. It just feels like it is.
Yeah.
And if you haven't had a sip again, you can notice how even now, to me, the bitterness is twice as strong as it was when I started. And you just had a sip, so you ruined it.
I wrecked it for myself. We could sit here for a minute and a half and wait for it to happen, but we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that. But that's your quick and dirty, and there's more to go there. We didn't touch on salty. We didn't touch on fat or umami. And you're not going to get fat because beer is a fat-free product. It doesn't exist in beer. But umami sometimes happens, especially in aged beers. You'll start seeing after 2 or 3 years, you'll start getting some of that kind of soy sauce, soy sauce, rich kind of umami flavor coming out of the back end of an aged beer.
I was really counting on umami being among these things. I can't tell you how disappointed I am.
I know. It's not something that happens every day in beer, though.
I'm still waiting to get the big bitter.
The big bitter finish.
It
just lingers with you, and this will never. This beer's not super aggressive the way some of them are. It's a just standard strength American IPA, but the longer you sit with it, the drier you get, which is one of the reasons I like this kind of beer, is that I sip it, set it down, and then 30 seconds later, I'm like, oh, I need another sip. It's it's kind of quenching in that way that it makes you keep drinking it.
Not that we need a reason.
Not that we need a reason.
Not that we need a reason. Anything else?
That's a quick and dirty intro to what mouthfeel can do for you.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry at the beginning of this thing that we've gotten so far along in these that I forgot that we were doing a Beer 101. But
that's all right. We have a comment section as well, so you guys can fill in. And once you've tasted this, you can send a comment back and say,
"That's right.
Hey, you know what? I tasted this other thing," or "Where did you guys find such and such?" And you can always come back and interact with us in that way through the comment section as well.
And at some point, this Beer 101, along with the other Beer 101s, will be part of the members-only section of Beer to Whiskey. So
enjoy them while you can.
Yes, enjoy them as a just casual visitor while you can. But as always, Big John, a fine job.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll see you
thank
next
you.
time.